Thank you. I know the green olives thing sounds weird, but if you grow up in Canada, you have green olives on like everything, and you come to love them, and then when I moved to like the west coast of the USA, you can't get them anywhere. So it's like weird, because I like sneak out of this room just to go find green olives, but that's besides the point. I'm actually a filmmaker, and as a filmmaker, I've traveled to over 50 countries in pursuit of stories. And as part of that journey, I've met some absolutely incredible people and had some incredible experiences, like being in the middle of the rainforest with a woman who was raised by elephants and actually walking with a herd of elephants. She'd been raised by them so much so that they treated her as like their child. You know, so it would rain and they would take their trunks and like pull her body underneath them. Or flying into Namibia in a little Cessna plane and landing in the middle of the desert, and then waking up with one of the last known hunter-gatherer tribes to exist. You just learn incredible things from these people. And then the excitement of being able to run out on the field for Super Bowl Sunday with the teams through the smoke and the fire as all of the action's happening. You know, over a decade of filming stories across all of these countries has really shown me something so powerful. And that is this, that we are the stories that we tell ourselves. That the most important story that you're ever going to tell is the story that you tell yourself every single day about who you are and what is possible for you and what you're capable of. And I want to give you some examples. I want to share some stories of people I've met that really show just how powerful that is. And the first one is the story of Dave Jacka. Now, Dave Jacka was a guy who, was this big, boisterous 19-year-old who loved to surf, and he was a carpenter and loved his motorcycles. And one day at 19, he's out riding his motorcycle, he hits a bump in the road and goes headfirst into a tree. He breaks his 6th vertebrae and wakes up a quadriplegic. He told me about waking up in the hospital in head tongs, and all he could see was the blue in the ceiling. And for 3 months, he would talk to people on both sides of him, never seeing their face, because he couldn't turn his head. So Dave gets home, and he's trying to figure out who he's going to be and what his life is now, right? He's got 6% of his body function, and he used to be this big, boisterous, outdoorsy kind of guy. And he can't even put himself to bed. He can't even go to the bathroom. And so he starts trying to regain some independence. So he starts trying to put himself to bed. Now the problem is, when all you can really do is lift your arms, you only have control of your biceps, you really can't do a lot. So he would go in his wheelchair and he'd manage to get himself to his bed, and he'd try and push himself from the wheelchair to the bed, and he'd fall on the floor. Wait 4 hours for somebody to find him and pick him up. Just heartbreaking. But he kept trying. He kept trying to find a way that he could get himself into bed. So he made a little hook that would hook onto the wheelchair so that when he pushed, he wouldn't fall on the floor. And he made little braces for his wrists, since he couldn't control them, that he could use to prop across. And after 2 years of trying, non-stop, he finally put himself to bed. And that was huge for him. I mean, that's nothing to us, right? That was huge for him because it meant that he had some independence back. He could decide when he gets up and when he goes to bed. And what it meant to him more than anything else was that he was only limited by what he thought he could do. All of a sudden, the whole world opened up. And it brought to mind his childhood dream of flying. He used to go to air shows and look at the planes and love that idea. And so he said, I'm going to fly. Now you can imagine if you're a quadriplegic going to a pilot and going, hey, you want to teach me to fly? They're going to laugh at you, right? No way am I taking that risk, putting somebody in a plane. But Dave Jacka went back to school, got an engineering degree, and spent 9 years modifying an airplane and learning to fly. And last year, he became the first person as a quadriplegic with 6% of his body function to fly entirely by himself across Australia. It's a multi-day trip. Incredible, right? And it's so powerful when we realize that this guy has 6% of his body function. The world told him it wasn't possible. And had he listened to them and started telling himself that story, that it's not possible, I'm limited, I am just this 6%, he never would have done it. But it's when he started telling himself that that's not all I am, that I am so much more, that all of a sudden things change. So this story, what you tell yourself, is incredibly powerful. And it can do really big things, but it can also really hold us back as well. Here's a photo of Dave and I before we went up that day. And I'll be honest, I've had a lot of really kind of like freaky, scary experiences, but flying with a quadriplegic, like, you do know what you're doing, right? It's a little scary in a little like tiny fiberglass plane. And he uses the tube that goes into his mouth as the propeller, and then he's got little braces for his arms to control the flight. It's unbelievable what he does. But that's only one side of the story, right? There's also the other side. There's also those of us who tell ourselves stories of things that we can't do, that we're not enough, that we're not smart enough or strong enough, that we're limited. And for that, I want to share the story of my mother. My mother had bipolar for about 15 years, and she also had a really big fascination for the Middle East. So that meant that when she got manic, she would actually fly to countries like Jordan or Syria or Lebanon. And that is not a place that you want to be manic dancing around in the streets, right? So much so that in Jordan, she was just dancing in the middle of the streets, and she ended up in prison. You know, they put her in prison, and her father had to go and rescue her from a Jordanian prison. And this went on and on for about 15 years, with her being okay for a bit, and then getting manic, flying to some far-off country, ending up in trouble, or falling into some kind of deep, dark, depressive pit, and somebody'd have to go and try and bring her back. The thing that happened through this cycle of bipolar and all of these amazing adventures was that she lost her ability to kind of rebound. Because every time she came out of this, it would have such a huge emotional and financial toll that she just didn't have as much left in her. And so on April 8th at 5 a.m., my sister called me. And I was in Australia, so I thought maybe she didn't know that it was 5 a.m. where I was at. And I texted her back and said, hey, it's 5. Do I really need to call you back? And all she said was, yes. And like literally from that moment that I just saw yes on my screen, I was like, my whole body froze. I left the room, I called her, and when she answered, all she said was, she did it. And if you live with somebody with severe mental disabilities, you know, those few words can mean so much. And when she said she did it, what she meant was she'd killed herself. Earlier that morning, she had taken a large amount of pills and committed suicide. And she did that. A lot of people, when we went back for the funeral and the wake and everything else, a lot of people would look at that and go, well, it was the bipolar. You know, the bipolar took her life, and it was something in the depressive side or the manic side, and that's what did it. But it wasn't that. It was that she had lost purpose. She didn't think she had anything left to give. That's the actual truth. What took her life was her belief that she really had nothing left to give in this world. She felt like she was taking way more than she was giving. And so when she ended her life, that's what it was. And so there's so much power in the stories we tell ourselves. If we tell ourselves that we're not enough and there's nothing we can do and we have nothing to give, that's how it can end. Or if we tell ourselves that despite our limitations, despite only having a portion of our body functioning, we can do anything, well, then that's possible for us. Now, for me as a storyteller, in living this and meeting all of these people, I was so fascinated by how we can apply storytelling to ourselves, how we can actually intentionally create our own stories of who we are. Because we like to think that like reality just is. We like to think that we are, you know, a certain level of intelligence or a certain level of attractiveness, or we're good with the girls or we're not, or whatever it might be. But we think that it just is. We don't realize how subjective it actually is. And this is a great example right here. What does this say? New York in the spring, right? No, it doesn't. It says New York in the spring. Most people don't see that. They see New York in the spring because our brain, our mind wants to see what it wants to see. We put things together in the order that makes sense to us. We don't actually see what's there. We see what we want to see and what makes the most sense. Reality is far more subjective than we imagine. And it gets way crazier than this. One group, they wanted to test if the way you thought could change how smart you did or how well you performed on a test. So what they did is they flashed something in front of everybody before you got a question, right? And the idea is answer as many questions as you can right. And we're going to flash something so quickly that you can't see what it is. So you don't know what's actually happening, but your brain is taking it in. So over here on this side of the room, we tell you guys that we're going to flash you the right answer. You can't see it, but it's going in your brain. So you're telling yourself, I'm seeing the answer. I know the answer. Whereas right over here, we're going to tell you guys, we're just flashing random information. So just go ahead and answer the question. What happens is, this group over here that was told they saw the right answer, even though they didn't see it, did way better on the test. The reality is, they were all just flashed garbage. It didn't mean anything, right? It was random numbers and letters that they were flashed, yet because this group thought they knew the answer, they did way better on the test. It's so powerful, our mind and how we think about these things. And other tests have shown that if we think we're stronger, we can actually improve how much our body grows. Or if we think we're doing more exercise, we can lose weight. Or if we think our vision's better, it can actually perform better. We can do better on an eye test. These things that you think are solid and fixed are actually far more malleable, and so much of it comes down to the story that we tell. And so what I want to share with you guys here is a really neat thing that we've been doing. I got a group of 20 people, and we spent 5 weeks kind of deconstructing their story. We wanted to kind of figure out, what is the story you're telling yourself now? And then let's recreate one that is the life you want to live, the things that really excite you, that you're really passionate about. Let's create a story that lets you do that. And so we're really fortunate to have a group of these people here today. So can you guys from the Better Human program stand up for me? So these guys, here spent 5 weeks sharing their story in a completely open and honest way, and it was incredibly powerful. And what I'm going to show you now is just a short clip that really shares who they are, where they are, and the transformations they have seen in taking apart that story. And since I'm low on time, I'm going to just roll it.
There was a time when I believed I wasn't good enough. And there was a time when my father and I were standing in the kitchen. My mother was just drunk, sitting on the couch in the next room. And my father was obviously angry and screaming at her, screaming at us, dealing with it, however he could. And it just turns on me, turns on us kids. And I'm standing there in front of him. He's standing in front of my face. Because I'm getting irritated the way he's yelling at us and yelling at my mom. And we're young enough, we're not really sure how to deal with it. But I know that there's this screaming maniac standing in front of me. And, you want to put a stop to it. And he turns to me and says, you're not good enough. Don't even think that you know what you're doing. I had no answers. I had no direction.
So for just about 20 years of my life, I had struggled with an addiction that was a secret to everyone around me. And I got really good at hiding that part of my life because I was ashamed. I would tell myself and believe that I was a phony because I was showing up differently than who I really felt like I was inside. That phoniness, that facade that I would put on every single morning started spilling over into every aspect of life.
I have spent 31 years feeling unworthy.
I feel like we were in this Burger King, maybe it was actually the drive-thru, and my dad, we were going through the drive-thru at Burger King. It was at lunchtime during high school, and I feel like we were coming up to get our food, and I just reclined the chair and put my hands over my face and just started crying because I couldn't imagine going back to high school and talking with people, let alone being an adult in this world and how to go on, because I was so uncomfortable with who I was, and I saw no one else out there who I could relate to.
I realized that the desire to help others is noble, and that's a good thing, but I can't show up for people as effectively if I'm not showing up for myself first. If I'm not my whole person, then I don't have as much to offer.
I realized that I'd gone all those years feeling that way, and there was actually no truth to it. I realized that I could change my life and I could change the lives around me.
It's also the first time that I don't wish that I wasn't gay, and that I'm actually glad that I am. I want to be visible for other people. I used to want to be I could be out and then just have people find out maybe on the side. But I want to go out of my way to say that no, I'm not straight. I'm a Lady Gaga fan. I don't know. I'm not really into sports, and that's fine. And I just really want to be open and visible about who I am.
I want to create content that tells people who are struggling that there is hope, that there is a way out from these deep, dark places that they might be stuck in.
Anything is possible. Anything is possible. Seriously, anything is possible. If you really want it and you really want it, just go for it. Don't be afraid to do it. Don't be afraid to take that step and just close your eyes and just say, screw it. Just do it.
Can I just get one more round of applause for these guys for being willing to share their stories? You know, you guys are so lucky with the age that you're at. You have the ability now to really shape the stories that you tell yourselves, because so many of us here, we spent decades living inside a story that held us back, believing that we weren't good enough, that we were defective, that we were unworthy. And you're in a position now to shift that, to change that, and to realize that no matter what you're going through and what's happened, you are in control of the story you tell yourself and how you handle it. And that no matter what you're going through, there's probably somebody who's dealing with that and worse. And so as you go forward, really think about the story that you tell yourself and realize that your life truly is far too precious not to make it the greatest story you've ever told. Thank you, guys.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.